Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I like what Shaza is saying. Shaza is saying basically we are using alarms and sensors, and that's exactly what we are doing here, Shaza. So I'm collecting all these alarms and and alerts. I will not say alerts, logs, okay, from all the system, and add it to my centralized location, which is we called it later on SIM solution, okay. And we said that the same solution have already been here for like almost from 2006 or 2005. This is the first time that Gartner has already recognized this terms. And these terms are basically divided to two basic stuff. SIM as like the we have getting data and arranging this data in a centralized location, and we have the SIM also where we get this data and start to analyze this data and start to find analytic about this data and correlate between events and come up with conclusions. And it will help us to identify if we have an incident or not. And we mentioned the guy that we will hire him to look into the SIM. We called it him the SOC engineer. And the SOC engineer is basically someone looking at the SIM alerts or SIM logs. And because he is trained, he understands what is important in your organization when it comes to assets. He can really identify if something went wrong or if there is any malicious activities happening, and he will be able to highlight this activity and send it back to the team with an incident response. And in a different lecture, we talked about what is the incident response are supposed to do. So this is very important because you can be in an interview and they will ask you what is the process of incident response, and you really need to remember that the process of incident response or the main function of an incident responder is basically is to look into, first of all, to identify we have a real incident. We look how to contain the damage of this incident. We look how to do eradications, and we look at how to recover the system to a good states from backup or from different sources. And finally, we get to do post incident. So this is actually could be an interview questions. So the SOC engineer need to identify incidents. We looked at how the SOC engineer can do this, okay? And we looked at how the incident response process, and we mentioned this way of looking at things, guys, are really nice because it's really can detect if there is something malicious, but it's not going to give you the full picture if we have a very advanced high profile attacks, because this way is reactive techniques. Reactive techniques means we are waiting to really obvious incident to happen. Okay, so and in order to respond to this incident and detect this incident, so basically this is the reactive techniques we mentioned. And the other side of the same solution, okay, the other side of the detections, we have another team, which is we call them the threat hunters. And the threat hunters are there to look for the new threats, to look for the 0 days. Maybe this is could be like someone have already discovered 0 days attacks that no one knows about it. But again, every time the attacker find a new vulnerabilities, when the attacker guys start to interact with the system, they will leave some traces, they will leave some artifacts, they will leave some digital evidence, okay? And the main job of these guys, who's the threat hunters, I will give them edge here, okay, is being out there looking for these IOCs or indication of compromise. We'll look at the good definition today for IOCs, okay? He's looking for this evidence, he's looking for these traces, and once he finds traces, he will start to have his own hypothesis that this system is compromised, and will try to prove if this system is compromised or no. So the threat hunting itself, guys, it's a process, and he really needs to give an hypothesis and start to collect the evidence and to start to analyze this evidence and try to come up with conclusion whether this is an indication of compromise or no. So he, in order for the threat hunter to do his jobs, so he also needs some logs, because he cannot just jump between server to server, because this is again, if you have a big environment, this is going to be a hectic job. So he need to get these logs to investigate. So he's looking also at your SIM solution. Okay, also he needs to look at something called threat intelligence. We cover the threat intelligence in an entire whole lectures, and we call that the threat intelligence is also a process. And threat intelligence is all about finding new threats, okay, and sharing these new threats with others. So these guys can get some threat intelligence feeds from other websites or from different organizations saying that there is a IP address has been recognized as, for example, a spam address. Or this IP address is basically is part of command and control. So he got these feeds and they started to look into his looking in the environment for this specific IP address. How can he look in the environment for a certain IP address or certain domain? We mentioned that the SIM does have a search bar here, and the search bar will allow you to filter and see the traffic that you are really looking for. So you can look at certain IP address, certain domain, certain hash file within the environment. And if you recognize one of these things, you can deep investigate. And the whole idea here by threat hunting is you're looking for threat hunting just to find the threat and that's it. No, once you find a threat, again, and you find this is an indication of compromises, you go back to this guy, which is incident response guy again, and saying, I found one, let's do something about it. Maybe they will start to develop a signature for these attacks, or maybe implementing a controls how to contain this attack. So he also working with the incident response. So both the SOC team tier 1 and the SOC team 3, they are working together with incident response and to investigate incidents, and also to find remedies, because this is the whole idea here, is the incident response. Once we find remedies, once we find an attacks, or once we find a threat, we really need to come up with a strategy to how to eradicate and get rid of this threat. This is the incident response. We mentioned also in the incident response, guys, there is another integral part of incident response, which is, we call it digital forensics. Okay, so if what happened in one of these computers or one of these servers are considered a crime, and I wanted really to present this evidence, okay, to the court, I really need to initiate another process. And we talked about this another process yesterday, which is a digital forensic process. A digital forensic process is starting with also you identify if there are incidents or no, okay, and started to make sure that you copy the very volatile data. So this is what we have discussed yesterday, the order of volatility. The order of volatility means there is some data or some information in our computer system and in our network is easy to disappear if the computer reported or being shut down. So this is where we need to collect this evidence right away. We talked first of all about the digital forensics guys will investigate a case. He will start the volatile data first, and this volatile data we want in details basically the number of shared files is open, the number of processes running on this computer, how the memory looks like by dumping the memory, what kind of port numbers is mapped to a certain process, what kind of user are logged remotely on this machine, what ports are open in this machine, what IP address is in a communication with this machine, what our table looks like, how the routing table in this machine looks like. So this is kind of information that if you don't really gather at that same time of an incident, then it will be almost impossible if the system is started to gather again. So that's why the digital forensics team, and that's why I mentioned that the digital forensics team sometimes they are working hand in hand with the incident response, and sometimes the incident response is basically is a digital forensics investigator. And we mentioned that sometimes the same solution does have two processes. The first process is to look at the logs in general and correlate and do alerts for the same SOC tier. Or there is another process that if I find very important part of artifacts, it will start to really archive this artifact and take a copy of it. So later on, you can start to investigate it and do your own report as a digital forensics. So even same solution will help the digital forensics team to collect logs from the network part, and they will collect logs from the system that has been hacked physically or even remotely. And we talked about also there is also non-volatile data, which is basically the hard drive. And we mentioned that you need to really have an image of the hard drive. Make sure that this image is right protected. Take hashes for this hard drive, and this is also we covered in the lecture. As you can see, guys, so far this whole topic is all about detections. Okay, and every day we are just covering a little bit about detections, okay, and which team is involved in this and what they actually doing in a day-to-day basis. So I hope this is, and also I have shown you guys that, for example, for the SOC engineer, they have to every day to look at alerts, and he need to decide if this is an alert which is representing, for example, representing an incident or an event. And we talked about what is the difference between event and evidence. Event and incident. Okay, guys, so far so good. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Rashad, so far so good.
Okay, so we're moving again here. This is again, I like to always to bring this because some organization will detect, will talk to you and say, okay, why we need to spend on SIM? Why we need to hire a SIM engineer? And again, you can always argue with them that we have problems right now. These problems that I don't have a silver bullet to solve all the organizations or the corporate environment or all the banking environment security issues. So I really need to have a monitor. This is my detection techniques. As I mentioned, NIST is highlighting that in order to build a proper program or security program, you need to implement identification, protection, and detection techniques. And again, also in order to be resilient, you need to be able to respond and recover from an attack. So this is being the cybersecurity resilient. So this is what NIST's recommendation, and that's what we do exactly. And that's what you see. A lot of budgets are going toward this detection techniques right now. You find a lot of new solution is all about detection, like EDR, like SOAR. All of them are detection and responding techniques. That is the level of cybersecurity. In each interview, they will bring the EDR and the SOAR solution topics. Okay, guys? And again, in detection malicious activity within the networks, I'm really relying on logs, okay? Because the logs can tell me what happened exactly in the system, how many failed attempt for login, okay? Who failed to authenticate with this system? If I'm looking at the web application, who was communicating, which session has been opened, what IP address the session started from, okay? What did he try to send in over this session? Okay, so this all logs is very important. This is very basically the whole the most important aspect here, because the logs I can use for three reasons. For one reason is basically to identify if there is something malicious or no. So this is the SOC team will do. Okay. Also, I need to take these logs as an evidence if later on I need to present it in the court. So also the digital forensics guys are consuming these logs. Okay. Also, we need the logs also for the threat hunters, because the threat hunters also is looking at logs to determine if something is suspicious or no. So he needs the logs as well. So we have three different teams looking at the logs. This is especially if you are big companies. And also you need to monitor the traffic. And I mentioned we need also a centralized location. Why we need a SIM? Because you cannot have the manpower to go in each one of these systems and investigate each system alone. This is going to be a waste of time, and it will not give you the big pictures. It's going to give you only related to this specific system. But I wanted really to correlate between events, as I will show you also today. Again, one more example. I needed to need so okay, someone failed to log in 3 times, and then he managed to log in, and then there is a processes has been created. This network connection has been started. Okay, so is this a normal activity or malicious activity, who can tell me all this? It is the same solution because it has a centralized location for all these logs. And basically, I'm really looking at the user behavior at that time and the system, what's happening in the system as well. You can also check from which IP address this user was trying to log in. So if you look at the source IP address and the source IP address is external networks, okay, you say, okay, why someone externally is trying to log in and started to new service and a new, for example, process on this machine. Okay, he's supposed to be here. This is a desktop, not a laptop. This user doesn't have a VPN connection. So how did he manage to log in from an external IP? So all these kind of clues, okay, can tell you what is really happening in your environment. And again, I need a SOC really engineer who is trained to look into and find out if this suspicious thing is happening. Okay, so this is like a generic I would say, slide, but it's important because I wanted to explain one thing, which is later on we'll use it today. So if you guys look at this, is basically the goals of cybersecurity. This is what we are being hired for, okay? And this is exactly will take me to when I met you in the early beginning when I started to talk about what is the main job of you guys inside the organization. And basically the main job is to protect their information assets. This is the main job. They are hiring you to protect the information assets. Why? Because once we open our network to the internet, once we open our network to the vendors and to the suppliers, networks, and our partner, there is a possibility of a cyber attacks and a risk of cyber attacks. So we really need to mitigate this risk and basically protect this information assets. And it's here, the first thing it's saying that you need to build layered defenses. Layered defenses mean this is the defense in depth. As you can see, layer after layer. And you guys, if you guys remember, we talked about something called the bullseye model. The bullseye model is from outside. We have the policies, procedures, training, and all the stuff. So this is the external outer sphere. And we look at after this physical security, network security, and then system security, application security, and then the data security itself. So this is from the layer technique, and this is important to remember this, and also important to remember the assurance model that I talked to you about it. So this is one thing. Reduce open vulnerabilities. So basically how to reduce open vulnerabilities. We taught you guys in the early beginning of this course also about how to do vulnerability scanning, how to validate this scanning, or if it's we have a real vulnerability or no. So we talked about you need to, part of your risk assessment is to find vulnerability within the network before the bad guys find about this vulnerability. So we taught you about how to find vulnerability in the host and networks. And lastly, keep out your unauthorized user. So this is basically achieving confidentiality for your system, okay? But then again, the threat actors did not leave obvious clue behind. So we really need to dig and detect if something really happening inside our organization. And the threat actor strategy is similar to island hopping to the target. So what is island hopping, and why this is important to us today in IOCs? This is back to in Second World War, guys. If you know it, I know it's, maybe some of you have read about it. This is basically الحرب العالمية الثانية, okay? So the United States, they are in a war with Japan, okay? So in order really to conquer Japan, okay, the United States started with hopping the island strategy, okay? Japan does have a lot of islands. They maybe have, I think more than 1,000 islands. So what they do, the US started to really attacking the not very well defined island, and they use this island to a hopping stage to another island. Okay, so they compromise one island here. Okay, and then once we have another island here. So once I have my military here and my gear and all my weapons here, I'll start to attack another one and another one and another one. And that's why they call it they called it the island hopping, until they managed to be very close, and then they bombed Japan itself, because the United States is very far from Japan physically. So they wanted to have bases here, because one of the things that you really need to establish in military, to have a support, okay, and to have lines of support. So you need ammunitions, you need food, you need to secure all the stuff. So if you don't have a base, okay, how would you let your soldiers to fight for a long time? Okay, so they started the strategy of island hopping, and that is exactly what the advanced threats are doing right now. So they look at not very secure system or an exposed system, okay, and then they compromise it. Once they compromise it, they started to look for more important systems. So they started to do island hopping. They started to jump to another system and pivot from a system to system. So this is, we call it pivoting or lateral movement. You can find it in, inshallah, later on next month when we talk about ethical hacking. Okay, so moving from one place to one place until we reach to the crown jewel of a company or in a corporate environment. Okay, and then we compromise this. But again, for me, how this useful for me as an investigator, as a digital forensics investigator, or as a SOC engineer, is hopping from one place to one place, leave traces. Okay, whether these traces that you try to install application here, or whether these traces that you try to scan the network to see where is your next hop, or whether these traces is you started to infect another machine with a malware. So you're gonna leave traces. And our whole purpose here in the IOC's section today, and as a SOC engineer, or even as a digital forensics engineer, or even as a threat hunters, to find these traces. Okay, because you cannot jump from island to island without leaving traces. Okay, you cannot have two car crashes without finding an evidence who was right and who was wrong. The same thing when the attacker started to really attack the most really vulnerable sites, and then moving onward this entire into something more important for us, they will leave traces. Our main job is to detect these traces as early as possible and respond as early as possible. Why? Because if we leave the enemy to just compromise machine after machine, we didn't find them early, they will reach to the really to achieve their objective. And achieving the objective, maybe they will compromise your Active Directory, and then they will have the Active Directory username and password, and then they will spread, for example, a malware or maybe ransomware into your network. So finding them early and looking at this ideology of what the attacker do, especially a lot of the attackers who work in the nation states, they actually following these steps, following the islands. So this is something that I find it interesting online. So I was thinking about it, and I said, this is really what's happening in reality, even in our networks. So it's good to bring it here so you guys to understand this concept of island hopping. And the most important thing for us is to detect them as soon as they breach our network. So we will be able to minimize the time of responding, and for sure to really break the kill chain before the kill chain can reach the objective of the attacker. Again, so this is what is advanced security or advanced persistent threats, APT. We talked about APT before, but again, these are the well-funded groups who's organized. They have the resources, they have the skilled people to do it. They have sometimes the support from a government to do their attacks. So we talked about APT. Okay. Okay, so I got a question here, is asking about the hopping island. Hopping island mean, guys, let's just give an example to clarify this quickly. Okay, so I have my network here. Okay, and this is the internet. So here I will give it I as an internet. Okay, and my internal network I will give it H as my home. Okay, what happened is usually you will have a website publish about your company, a mail server, and this is published for everyone. Everyone online can see this website. Everyone online can see this mail server. Everyone online can see your DNS server. Okay, but you have inside your home or inside your network here a very important server, which is maybe application server. Okay, and this application server where you run your PHP, your Java, your Node.js, you name it. Okay, and then maybe in the back end here you have a database, which is where you have all the credit card of your customers, all the details of your customers, all of the details of your employees. So there is a lot of on stake here in this area. Okay, so what the attacker will do is to compromise, first of all, the most public facing website, because these guys are there, he cannot see it. Once he compromises this system, okay, he will be this system, the website here, and the PHP application server, okay, and then he will look at vulnerability in the PHP server to pivot his attacks to this one. So he looked at the most open vulnerable website. He took over this website, established his connection, is now persistence. He now can come back to the system anytime, and now he start to move toward this more very precious assets. He started to look at the PHP because he knows if he compromises PHP servers or Node.js servers or maybe ASP.NET server, he can really later on look at the database. Okay, so he will jump from here to the PHP. So he'll compromise this one. So this is the first island. Okay, this is the second island. Okay, and this is the third stage for him. Okay, so this is the jumping island strategy that I was talking about, guys. And sometimes you have even another tier here. Okay, so once he compromises this one, he will take his time also to compromise another tier within your network where your Active Directory is. Okay, because he wanted to implement ransom. He steal your data. Okay, but he's not really happy about just only stealing the data. He wanted also to put you in a really hot water in front of your clients, or even destroy you as a company, or even an organization. So he can really say, okay, you know what? Now I have already compromised the database. I have all the data I want, but I wanted also to take some money. Okay, so I will go after his maybe Active Directory, and maybe later on I will implement a full ransom attack within the network. So he will jump between network and. But what I'm trying to say is, guys, every time he's compromising one system here, okay, he's leaving some traces. Some traces. So it will be our responsibility to detect these traces, okay? Especially if he managed to bypass our prevention techniques, okay, I need to detect these traces. And again, APT is one of these groups that they are going slow and low. I explained this one. They go as a sleeping attacks. Sleeping attacks mean what? They compromise the system and they do minimum disruption, okay, minimum activity, and they don't mind to stay months and months within a system until they compromise the second system. So, for example, SolarWinds attack, which was a big attack. If you guys wanted to check it out, it's called SolarWinds. The attackers compromised one systems for months, okay, and then they implemented their strategy and they have infected one of the application software with a malware, and then they spreaded this malware. Okay, exactly. Leave some evidence that's be helpful for SOC and IR team. Exactly. So once we have these traces, this is our IOC. So the traces or the evidence here is the IOC, guys. So as you can see, the IOC is indication of compromise. Maybe you find an IP address which was connecting to this server and sending very weird traffic over a specific port. Okay, so this is an indication. Okay, maybe you can find a domain name that these servers are actually every 5 minutes or 10 minutes is going and send some like a message like a keep alive. So this is also an indication. Okay, maybe you find a piece of software installed in this machine, okay, with a hash value, a specific hash value, and this software looks like a very suspicious software. So we started to look at this software, understand. So all of these IOCs, or indication of compromise, is what you really need to look at. Okay, it's good for your digital forensics team because they can later on display it in the court as this person was already infecting our system with this kind of software, or this is malicious code. Okay, it's good for us as a threat hunter to find these indicators and act in a timely manner to stop the attack to go further. So I can kill the attacks here instead of killing it here, instead of killing it here. So better to kill it in the early stages. And that's why we have a proactive approach. So as early as an indication of compromise showed up, okay, you can respond in a proper way. Okay, guys. And again, the threat actors are really nation states, and sometimes they can deny, disturb, destroy a network while trying to remain undetected. Means this is what I call, they are the sleeping attackers, or they are the slow and low attackers. So this is what they call them in the wild. And if you have any doubt, guys, about the existence of these groups, I would go and tell you that read about a certain attack that's happened in Beit Rabigh. This is a very close area to Mecca. Okay, there's a facility there built by Japanese and Saudi Arabia, and they had a major attacks in 2018. I wanted you guys, if you have time, to read about this attack. It's called Triton attacks. Okay, read about how the attacker managed to get to really infect the entire systems, and how they took over even to the safety system, and how they were planning to blow up the entire city. So this shows you what kind of attacks you guys are dealing with. Okay, so this attacker is skilled, advanced, can be network, it can be taking months or even years to carry out these attacks, because the attackers are really simulating the attacks on their environment, making sure they can carry out these attacks, and then they execute the attacks. So you're not really in rush to implement this attack. Again, pattern and method gathered from IOC can be used to identify which APT is being disruptive. Means what, guys? Every single group, every single advanced persistence group, they have a methodology, they have a technique, they have a procedures to compromise systems. Okay, by studying the pattern of compromising system, you can really start to identify who is behind this attack, and later on you can give it a name, and later on you can really see if that's attacks is happening somewhere else. So you can tell this is the same perpetrator who done this attack, he's also doing this attacks. So he's, why? Because I studied his techniques. Because one of the things that is not easy for a person to change is the techniques. He can change the IP address, okay, that he comes from. So he can really use another IP address, or he can use a new malware. So this malware he can generate using certain toolkit. So he can really change the hashing and how this malware is acting. So this is he can do. Okay, he can also change the domain that he's coming from. They even having this flux domains, which is even make it even harder for you to really recognize from which domain they have. They even can use the Tor networks to hide their IP address. Okay, guys. So they have so many techniques to really hide so many techniques to hide the IP, the hash, the malware they're using. They can change stuff, but one of the hardest things they can change is their techniques. So they usually do a certain techniques. So first of all, they will do social engineering. After social engineering, they will do credential harvesting. After credential harvesting, they will try to reach the systems over VPN and all the stuff. This is their techniques. So that's why I think maybe a few days ago, we talked about something called pyramids of pain for a gentleman called, I don't know if you guys remember the pyramids of pain. I think I have it here. Let me just go quickly and show it to you. This is the pyramid of pain. Okay, if I have it, I hope I added one. Yes, this is the pyramid of pain. This is saying that's why they called it the pyramid of pain. This is because it shows the difficulty of the attacker to change his technique. So in the early beginning, like if he giving you a malware, in the next attack he can change this malware. Why? Because he can change a little bit in the way that this malware is spreading or activated, and then it will create a completely new hash. Why I need a new hash? Because you know how our antivirus are working is basically when you give it a malware, it will create a hash value for this specific malware or this specific virus, okay? And then it will develop a signature for this specific hash, and it will look for this signature for every single file you download from the internet. So if it find a match, it will say, you know what, this is a virus, don't install. So most of our techniques or prevention techniques work is in the hash value of a certain malware or a hash value of a certain virus. And again, you guys remember early beginning when we talked about what is the best tools in the hands of the attackers to really infiltrate systems is basically malwares. Okay, so they can easily write a malware and they change the IP address where this malware need to report to after infection. This is will create a completely hash value. So for them, it's easy. For the attacker, is gonna be easy. They can change the IP address of a command connecting to after the compromise, or even the system will exfiltrate data to it after a compromise. They can change the network or host artifacts by deleting this stuff. Here, it's gonna for them, it's gonna be not easy to change the tools. Why? Because there is a limited tools. So basically, if they are using certain tools, it's difficult for them to use another tools. Why? Because they can develop their own tools for first of all, but once they develop their own tools, they don't want every attack to change these tools, because tools, guys, it takes so much time to really create and implement a tools for hacking. So Metasploit, for example, it took years to be written, and we will talk about Metasploit later on. But if you guys heard about Metasploit, it's basically a framework for attacking and to install exploit and attack machines. So in order to come up with a new tools like a Metasploit is not easy. So it's difficult for the attacker to change the tools. Also, it's difficult for the attacker to change his technique and procedures to attack a systems. Okay, that's why we can study these techniques, we can study these procedures, and then later on we can really map it to a certain groups. Okay, guys? Okay, that's professional work. How will we leave evidence? Okay, how they will leave evidence? We'll talk about leaving the evidence right now. Don't worry, they will leave evidence, because as Locard said, this Locard is the Sherlock Holmes. He said every time you touch the crime scene, you really need to leave an evidence, and that's why it's. But again, in digital words, okay, in a physical world, it's easy. The evidence is very obvious. You can tell. Yani if you have two cars are crashing to each other, okay, you can see an evidence. These two cars crashed. You can see who has hit one first, who was right, who was wrong. Okay, but in digital world, guys, there is so many logs are created per second. Okay, there's so many events are created per second, right? So it's really looking for a certain evidence is gonna be like looking for a needle in a haystack. كأنك بتبحثي عن إبرة في جبل من القش. This is how it works. Okay, so you really need to have a trained SOC engineer. You really need to have this is the ترجمة حرفية يعني زي ما بيقولوا. This is the Arabic 100% translation for looking for a needle in a haystack. So basically, yes, you're looking for a certain event within hundreds of thousands of events. So you really need to clarify all the false positive and looking at only the really true positive things that will help you. And we'll look at this in 1 second, guys. We have already talked about computer forensics. I don't have to explain it one more time. We already talked about it. We already talked about that the pattern and the techniques from IOCs, from the indication of compromise, we'll talk about indication of compromise, can really tell us who is being behind this one, okay? And we talked about also MITRE ATT&CKs, and the MITRE ATT&CKs is basically a threat knowledge platform that will allow you guys to look into the website and see we have certain group. This is their way to compromise systems. This is the way that they are, for example, doing persistent. This is the way they are going to move from one certain system, okay? And they will give you a certain mitigation also techniques for this. So we will study also MITRE ATT&CKs. We'll talk about MITRE ATT&CKs one more time, but it's very important, guys, to look at MITRE ATT&CKs and understand it. So we mentioned the IOC also is good for computer forensics and how we are detecting the threats, okay? So this is the first point that I was explaining to you guys now, is basically it's not easy to find an evidence for compromise. Why? Because we are looking at so many logs at the same time, okay? And we really need to look at these specific logs that shows something was maliciously happening, okay? And we also, most of our preventive techniques here, guys, are used signature. So if I'm getting logs from my antivirus, for example, these logs will send me alert only, okay, if they really recognize a malware or a virus. Like, let's say that this is a computer, guys, okay, and this is C computer, this is my SIM, okay, so this is my SIM website, this is my SIM dashboard, okay. I'm getting a log from my computer or my antivirus, okay. These logs or this alert will be only based on a signature on the on my computer here. So my antivirus would be running here. It noticed one virus. It would alert me there's one virus here, okay. But what if my computer is infected, okay, with a virus and it's not part of the signature of the antivirus? Okay, how can I get this detected? So this is another one, okay. Another thing that you also can be useful to understand how can we detect the threats is to look also into the traffic that generated from this machine, okay. So maybe you didn't get an alert here after the machine has been compromised, but looking at the inbound traffic and the outbound traffic, it can give you an idea about what's happening, okay. Or maybe you take a sample from this machine that's from for example, you downloaded a file and this file is virus, but your antivirus didn't recognize it because it is new virus. So you can take this file, guys, and do threat hunting on this file. So you can do something called malware analysis that we have already discovered before. We talked about before the static analysis, the dynamic analysis, until we can really reach this is a real virus or no, okay, by running it in a different environment and check, or maybe upload it in one of this virus antivirus websites, like to check if this website is this sample is a virus or no. And once you find out it's a virus, you can start to implement your defensive techniques to create a specific hash so it can really eradicate this. So it really requires to have the full picture. So even if you get infected with a new malware breed, just by looking at your network inbound traffic and outbound traffic, do threat hunting procedures, you can really identify very advanced threats, viruses, and wounds. Okay, so let's look at this, the topic for today. This is the indication or indicator of compromise. What is the indicator of compromise? And this is basically the definition here. There's so many definitions. One coming from NIST. I will explain the one from NIST, and we'll explain the one from here. And I will explain another also definition. So we have 3 definitions for indication of compromise, and all of them are saying the same thing, but a different way. So just at least if you are an interview, you can remember one of them in the interview. So it's saying in a very simple way, it's a clue, okay, or it's an evidence that can be used to indicate an intrusion or a compromise of a host in a network, okay? So what did they saying? There is a clue, okay? There is an evidence, there is a log coming from one system that can indicate, okay, there is an intrusion in the system. So this is the first early beginning of the one. Okay, like a proof, or, and again, a proof, we can call this clue digital forensics evidence. This machine has been compromised. Like what? Like a sample of a file, okay, like an IP address that you connect to, like a process that has been created in your computer. Like, for example, a registry key has been added to this computer. Maybe a new user has been added to this computer. So there's so many clues, okay? And these clues can tell me there's an indication of a compromise, okay? IOC can reveal, يعني once you find this clue, once you find this evidence, okay, Ustaz Asail and Bassam, once you find this, it can tell you, first of all, the severity of an event, which is very important. Why? Because we mentioned the SOC engineer guys need to do triage, and the triage in a very simple way is need to really highlight some of these incidents as a very high severity. So the incident response team, you need to deal with it right away. So once, let's say that you have a database server, and this database server all of a sudden give you an alert, it's saying that one user has been added to the admin of this database server, okay? This is, could be an event, and this is, could be a compromise. So this guys, he need to verify who added this user. He need to see who logged as this user, and he's logging remotely or he's logging locally. So he really need to do his investigation. But eventually he need to say, okay, this is an important asset for us, and this is seems like an indication of compromise. I need to give it a very high severity and send it to the incident response. Okay. It also really help us to answer the question where. So to focus for incident response and mitigation, because he needs to specify which assets was under attacks. So he need to really highlight this to the incident response team. So the incident response team, they start their operation right away on this machine. Okay. Also can highlight who the threat actors, okay, and reveal the tactics and techniques they use to compromise the system. Okay, so with the deep investigation, I can tell this malware has been downloaded, or this IP address is coming from this certain part of the world, okay, or they are using Tor network, or they are using their own compromised machine, okay, or they are using bots. Who own these bots? Who controls these bots? So this is kind of a question that you can come up with, and just by tracking the IP address, who was adding this user, you can really tell if who is behind this. And also by checking how this machine has been compromised, you can tell about the tactics, techniques, or procedures they use to compromise. And again, you can take this compromise evidence and go to MITRE ATT&CKs and see who are using these techniques to compromise machines. Okay, so there is this piece of evidence can really help me to answer many questions. What happened? Okay, where it happened, how it happened, and who was behind it. They called it sometimes the 5 W's, and this is the clue of evidence. Okay, and the indication of compromise, guys, the one that I like here in this specific slide is as if you are driving a car and you have this dashboard, and you can see this dashboard it does have an indicators. So sometimes when you click the flasher, something will happen. When the battery is low in your car, something will give you an indication, like one of these things will light up. Okay, if your maybe engine is not working properly, you will get this one. If the oil is basically is low, it will give you this indicator. Okay, so it's like a dash. You are sitting in a dashboard, and once of these lights open, or once of these lights turn it on, it's an indication for you that something is not right in the car. And exactly the same thing, yeah, it's an alert. So it's exactly the same thing we have in our cars, we will have it in our SIM solution. So once we get an alert, okay, we investigate it, and this could be an indication for a compromise. So here it's saying that a car dashboard provide a real time. This is very important, real time, because what we're getting right now an alert for what's happening in our car, for performance measures and safety indicators. So if you are not wearing your seat belts, it will also show this. If your airbags is not working properly for whatever reason, it will give you an indication for this. So if you have the tire pressure is not adjusted, it will also give you an indicator of this. This is exactly what we are looking to do in our SIM solution. We should have a dashboard, and this dashboard will highlight for us any security issues. And we really need to, and how it managed to get this, it's getting logs from different area and it's showing to us. And the same thing in the car. It's checking the tire pressure and give you an indicator. It's checking the battery lifetime and it's give you an indicator. The same exact thing. So it's getting logs. And even in the more modern cars that is all computerized, it can tell you guys things like how much gasoline you are burning per kilometers. Are you utilizing maybe the motor in a proper way or no? So this is all the stuff, the engine, sorry, in a proper way or no. So this is all a system that is getting alert from a different component of your car, and it's showing you in the basically in the dashboard. Okay, guys. So I have a file here to ensure that there is no attacks. Exactly. So like machine incident response, use indicator to diagnose potential problems and determine why they occurred. Improper use, someone is improperly use the system, a mechanical failure or sabotage threats activity. So we really need to, once we get one of these alert, as we do in real life, we took our car to a garage or to maybe a workshop to check the car. So we wanted to make sure, because we are using this car on a day-to-day basis to do our jobs or to go to our work. So we don't want this car to stop all of a sudden, or some like really fatal issue happen in the car. So we took it to the garage to see, and the garage is basically where is the incident response happening. Okay, they start to check your car, they investigate why you got this alarm, and if it's like a fake alarm, they will tell you, no, don't worry about it. This is a fake alarm. We're gonna reset this alarm right now. If it's real alarm, they said, okay, you know what? You need to do something about it. You need to change the battery. You need to do something about it. That's the same thing. When you have these clues coming from your systems about something is not right happening, you really need to investigate it. If it's a real alarm, you need to respond. If it's a fake or false positive, you need to ignore it. So this is what I like to highlight in this part. Okay, and again, why we use indicators of compromise, guys? And here's it will help us to identify the advanced persistent threats. This is what I told you in the early beginning. We have the whole detections chapters is all about how to really recognize, these guys, because the script KD guys, the non well organized groups, they will leave very obvious, I would say, very obvious evidence. They are trying to attack your system, and you will be easy can find it, and then you will be easy to mitigate it. But I'm really worried about these advanced guys. Why? Because these advanced guys are really sneaky. They are using the latest and the greatest tools. They are funded. So this is where I'm really worried about. So IOC can help me to identify these APT groups, indicate something is wrong in our network or in our systems or on our application. So this is an indication also. That's why they called it indicators. Okay, it will help us in forensic identification of a crime or attack. But again, once you find that you have an attack, or once you have you find that your system being compromised, this will be a call for the management to decide: do we need a forensics investigation to start? So if we need to do a forensic investigation, we need to keep the evidence in a way that is not going to be, we need to copy the volatile data. We need to keep the evidence in unaltered or modified, we need to start the chain of custody. Who is giving this call? It according to the organization and the crime or the attack itself. Okay, so if you find someone is doing really bad stuff with his computer system, then this is considered as a crime by laws. And that's why, guys, in some investigation, you need to talk to the law, so to the lawyers and the Department of Justice about what's happened. So in order for them to tell you, yeah, this is will require an investigation, and this is we give you a search warrant to look at the evidence. So we look at this also, so we can see the IOCs is related to ABT, and it's related also to alerts and coming to the SIM, and also it's related to the forensics. So all of them are really connected dots in the same area of or same arena of detections. Okay, understanding how the compromise took place or occurred means that we have now the mentality we can build this evidence, so we can have a story now how this guy managed to really compromise the system. And this is will only happen, guys, if I have the full picture, if I have what system being compromised, how it's being compromised, what network traffic was being transferred to this system, what application run in this system at that time. So you really need to have the logs from all, so you can come up with a solid story how this been happened. And this is exactly what you can see in the also in the when you see a movie and there is a crime has been committed by someone, they start to bring evidence from everywhere, and they will have a hypothesis. Oh, the attacker jumped from this specific window, he break into this room, he stole this amount of money, and then he left from the front door because he managed to open the door. We can find his fingerprints or fingerprints on this specific door. So that you come up with the whole scenario what happened, because this scenario needs to be solid. You need to go back to the court and saying, this is the scenario, this is what happened. I know how he break in, I know what he compromised, I know how he left the systems. So I need to follow a story. This is the same thing we do here also. Testing your system network for vulnerabilities. This is also indicators of compromise. It will it's one of the uses for indicators of compromise. Is we really need from time to time to look for vulnerabilities and for threats within our network. So we can use the indicator of compromise. Okay, guys. There is two terms exist right now. There's one called IOC and IOA. And what is the difference between IOC and IOA, guys? So IOC is an indicator of compromise. It's a piece of evidence from a potential intrusion. So this is again the first early beginning definition. This was a clue. Here we're saying it's a piece of evidence. Okay, so now we're moving more towards this. It's an evidence from a potential intrusion, identifying malicious activity on a network or in a system or in an application. They are the breadcrumbs to the source of the attacks. And the breadcrumbs, you know, like if you eat some bread and there's a small crumbs falling down, this is go back again to the this guy's what he's saying, the Sherlock Holmes. Every contact leave a trace. So because the attacker was in a contact with this system, he was really within this system. He maybe changed a certain. He maybe changed a certain file, or he maybe changed a certain part of the memory, or he maybe changed a registry or a service within this within the basically the system. So a company being vigilant of these can help limit the damage of if the situation does occur. Means like if you are really doing a proactive jobs to find this indication of compromise as early as possible, it will help you guys to also contain the damage of these attacks. So if I find this after 1 day, it's not like if I find this after 5 days, it's not as I find this after 3 months, okay? So it's important for the company to be really looking for this indication of compromise. This is to really fortify their defending, because once you find one of these compromise or indication of compromise, you can move ahead and start to mitigate the attack. Okay, here guys, what is an IOA, which is indicator of attack? Newer terms of IOCs. We can see also this is when the attack already on place, and the attacker are moving within your network, moving from one machine to one machine. So they are already there, okay, and they already compromise multiple systems. So this is indication of compromise. This is the attacker in the early beginning. He maybe give you a piece of malware, changed the service, changed, for example, a registry key. So it's not really compromising whole network. Here he compromised. He tries to figure out. We here to tries to figure out the intent of the attacker by studying his IOA. So now we are wanted to really know where the attacker is heading with this attack. Okay, he now compromised two machines. Where is he heading? What is really intent? Okay, aims to identify what is happening currently and what will occur next. So this is the IOA. This is, as I can see, reactive approach, and this is more like a proactive approach. Okay. Exactly. So it's focused it's focused now because I'm compromised right now. There's no, I'm not looking for indication of compromise. I know that I'm compromised. Okay. I wanted really to figure out what the attacker is all about, where he is going with this attack. Okay. طبعا for sure you need to implement your incident response right away. But this is really they use this a lot, I would say, in the honeypots. Okay, because they wanted to study the attackers and they wanted to study the attacker TTPs. So they gave him the honeypot, okay, and they started to study. He already compromised one system, he compromised the second systems. He's going where with this attack, okay? So we really wanted to study the attacker to know who he is, and also we wanted to see what is his next step, because this is later on will help us to build our knowledge base, which is a MITRE attack knowledge base. So I will show you guys how the MITRE attacks look like. And this is again another definition, but this is from NIST, and really NIST, I find it very well organized when it comes to documentation and definition. So here, as per NIST, indication of compromise is basically, look, a forensics artifacts. So now we're moving from a clue to an evidence to now we are getting this is a forensics artifact. So I have digital evidence extracted from intrusions, okay, identified on organization system at the host or the network level. So I'm now not talking about only clues. I'm talking about we have a digital forensics evidence, okay, and these digital forensics evidence are extracted from one of my host machine or from one of my network machine that shows that something is not maliciously happening. And again, what is the digital forensics? We have already covered this point before, and we mentioned that the forensic evidence is application of scientific investigation techniques to digital crimes and attacks. And the whole idea behind digital forensics is to find who is the perpetrator and take him to the judge or take him to the court so he get his punishment. So this is exactly what is digital forensics. Why I'm using scientific approach? Because I wanted to really prove this is really the one who's committed the crime. So they started to track his phone. They started to track where did he goes exactly at that specific time. They started to look at the camera system within this place where the attacker was, where the crime is committed. So they tried to connect all this evidence and traces until it shows to them this was really the guy who did the crime. And the same thing, we do the same thing. And again, here, it's saying we back to the Locard principle, and Locard saying every contact leave a trace, means if the guy was in the house of the victim, that means somehow he left a fingerprint, or maybe somehow his fingerprint in one of the cups or in this house, or maybe he opened a door when he was leaving. Maybe he left the weapons of this crime somewhere in the house. So there is always a trace, okay? And again, guys, I find one of these, if you guys have find, it's called Digital Forensics File. It's a TV shows in the US, and it shows you how they are investigating crimes, whether it's a digital crimes or whether it is a real crime, physical crimes, and they will show you how really with a small hair, facial of hair, or a small DNA sample, or even sometimes the nails of someone they were fighting before he killed someone, and the nails of the victim, scratched this guy's skin. So there is a little bit of skins under his nails. So they get this skin, and they do the DNA analysis, and it shows exactly who was the killer. It's called Forensics Files. It's a very famous TV show. I think it was like online. I don't know if I have seen it in YouTube. I think I got it from someone, but it's called Forensics File. Okay. Why we need the indicator of compromise? Because it will help us to do early detections, which is basically the most important thing. If I do early detections, I can stop the attacker from really cause a lot of damage. So this is very important, okay? And it also allows me to blocking further unauthorized activity. So if I manage to detect his move, I can really block him from going anywhere further within my network. So this is very important. So this is basically uses of indication of compromise. It also can help me to understand the attacks, what happened exactly, how he compromised the system. So and later on, it will help me to better build my defenses so this not attack is not happening again. So if someone is doing phishing attacks, over phishing attacks, and he is very smart in the way he do the phishing attack and the social engineering attacks, I can implement the training. I can implement better defenses next time, so it will not affect me again. Okay, and later on also it will help this indicator of compromise. If I really come up with a good indicator of compromise which is new and related to new APT, I can share this information with other, and that's mean that I'm doing something called threat intelligence, especially if there is a new malware that started to spread, مثلا in the banking environment or e-commerce environment. If I am the first one who get this indication of compromise and can share it with everyone in the industry, I'm gonna save the entire industry from having the same exact issue. So this is, and again, the pattern and the method IOCs, like how you being compromised, okay, can be used to really identify the attackers. As again, I mentioned the way that he leave traces, okay, and which IP address he used, which tool network he used, what kind of malware has been he's developed. Give me an idea who was after me. So this is also good to really, later on to use it as a threat intelligence, so people know how these attackers are really working and what is their methodology to attack and compromise system. Okay, so what is the types of indicator of compromise, guys? Here is the types. Okay, thousands of IC can be presented in a large network. Okay, and again, see, this is a connection now between what we studied in SIM and what we studied. We need a centralized location so we can look at these logs. Without this, it's going to be very hard for us to find this indication. So this is the majority of evidence is gathered and fed into IOC's security event and event management SIM system, which is 8 forensic investigators in data organization. Evidence can be found in a variety of places. However, there is a few items that can be utilized as IOCs. And here, for example, activity from strange geographic regions. So you never dealt with North Korea in any trades, and you find all the like the SIM showing you a foreign IP address from North Korea or from Iran in your environment. So this is going to be an indication of compromise, definitely. Okay, because why would someone log in from this specific region to my website? This is could be a bit suspicious. So you really need to start to investigate. So here saying most businesses receive traffic from a specific region. The state sponsors attack as well as those that originate from countries outside the organization designated geographic area, resulting in traffic indications that are not found in a regular region. And also there is also a way to look at this, guys. You really need to implement something called visual the visualization or visualing for your traffic. So you can see that usual traffic are coming from certain regions or certain areas. And if there is something abnormal happening in another region, you can really tell this is something not normal. And you can easily say, okay, let me investigate this more. This is maybe an investigation, like I would say, an indication of compromise. So I have every day dealing with 3 countries. Okay, now all of a sudden I'm getting traffic from 7 countries. Why am sending traffic to another extra 4 countries today? So looking at this strange geographical regions can tell me if there's a compromise. Maybe one of the system is really compromised and started to send the traffic to one of these new regions. Okay, and also there's also excessive request in important files. You have a very important files within your network, and you all of a sudden shares, you find a lot of requests as a privileged user to access these files. So this is also indication of compromise. Without a high privilege account, an attacker is compelled to experiment with various attacks in order to acquire access to the files. Attempt to get access from the same IP address or geographic regions should be investigated. So if you are having a file which is important and you find someone from external IP address are trying to see these files, this is also an indication from a compromise. Also, high authentication failures. If you have a system and you have so many authentication failures or login failures in this system, especially the security events, okay, this is also an indication of someone is trying to compromise or to brute force a system, especially if you don't have a lookout strategy, then you should really investigate the high authentication failure. So they mention here, attacker utilize automation to authenticate with published credential in account takeover. A high volume of authentication attempt may indicate that an attacker has stolen a credential and looking for an account that's grant a network access. So this is an indication of compromise as well. High privileged user activity, irregularity or on sensitive data. So this is why I told you guys the admins, I need to look at the admin behavior within my network. So I really need to have something like UBA, which is user behavior analytic. So the user behavior analytic and BAM solution, which is privileged account access management, is gonna really track every single user and every single administrator and see what is their day-to-day activity. If they find anything irregular, like not normal, okay, they will really highlight this. So I have, for example, an admin who's for the first time he's accessing the database server. Okay, maybe this is a normal activity, but he really been asked to do this, but I really behavior for the last 10 days or last months. Okay, so I can go and ask him why you are checking this website or why you checking the database. So he can come up with a good, reason, or maybe his account is being compromised and someone is trying to reach through this my database, guys. Okay, so this is also this is all indication of compromise. As you can see here, this is just last slide we'll see before we jump in and look at we'll have a break. So here, guys, this is you have this screen over here. It's coming from OSEC. OSEC is also a SIEM solution, and you can see there is a new user has been added to systems. So I have user added to a Windows system, and then later on, listen port status, net state, change it, new port open or closed. So you got another alert saying once this user has been added, you find a new port in your computer has been opened. It means you are communicating with someone, or someone is open a port as in a listening state to get a connection from outside. So this is also something. And then the system audit events also happened. There's 67 events. But really, what I wanted you to check is both of them here. That both of them here is low, but this one new user added, it took the event security level medium, okay? And we know that's one of the attacker's techniques to really be persistent on the system is to either compromise a system account, or maybe to create account that they can use to log into the system, because you know that our operating system is basically multi users. So most of our operating system, whether Linux or Windows, they are allow multi-user to be logged in on the same machine. Maybe Windows allow 3 users to be concurrently logged in, or an Linux system, it can allow more users to be logged in concurrently and at the same time. So once I found this specific event, I really need to, because this could be basically could be compromise. The attacker managed to add a new user to the system, and he's going to use it later on. So sending this, so first of all, you need to know which log file will be created. So there is a log file called 4465, 4625, okay, from Windows. And every time you add a new user, or it's 4625 or another, so this is the security event in Windows. Okay, once you get the security event, I wanted to send this security event to my log server or my SIEM solution. And once I get this SIEM log, I really need to investigate. Okay, how can I investigate in this? I can ask the IT team, have you added a new user to this system? Okay, the system that's mentioned here, because if you double click on this system, you will find some data about this system. It could give you the system name, the system IP address. Okay, so just I double click on this, I can see the system name and system IP address. The engineer here will call the help desk and say, you know what, I have this system, which is the IP address and the name of the system. I have a new users has been added to this system. Are you guys are the one who's adding this? If this yes, then this was an event and case closed. If this was no the answer, this is now becoming from an event to an incident, and we really need to investigate why this has happened here, guys. Okay. So this is exactly what happened. Again, also listening board, guys. If I have time here, also I can go and check why there's an open board has been opened or closed in this system. Okay, طبعا there is so many of these events, but if I have time, okay, I can go and check which board has been opened. So some tools, like as I mentioned before, like packet capture, like Wireshark, can help me to check what is the source IP address, what is the destination IP address, okay, what is the destination board that has been opened, why 2000, what kind of communication is happening over the board 2000. Okay, so I really need to go, and there is some I would say option here in my Wireshark. It's called flow, and the flow will show you basically the TCP stream between two machines. So you see what kind of communication happening between these two machines right now, and you can understand what kind of communication they have. So just checking the source IP address, the destination IP address, which port number I'm talking to right now, can give me a bit of details about if this is a compromise or no. So this is also good. But again, as you can see, I got some logs. Okay, I investigate these logs, and these logs can be an indication of compromise. It could be an evidence, or it can be a regular event, and I don't have to worry about it. So we'll stop here, guys, and I will come back about MITRE attacks, okay, and how MITRE attacks will help us also to understand the IOCs. So this is inshallah when we come back. So I think it's a good time to have a break. It's now almost 10:40, right? So we'll take 15 minutes break. We'll come back around what's time? It's gonna be 10:55. Okay, yes, 10:55.
Yeah.
Okay, so 10:55, guys, we'll come back, inshallah, for the rest of the lecture, and we'll look at the different type of also IOCs. Okay, guys, see you guys in a
Okay.
bit.